Japanese popular music can be defined by two eras, before X and after X. What may initially appear to you as the Japanese equivalent to Guns N' Roses with just as much drama, believe me, they're so much more than that. Describing X, later dubbed X Japan, as merely that would honestly be an insult. Their history and importance to Japanese music as a whole is immeasurable. X came about in the early 80s in a time when Japanese mainstream artists didn't typically look like this. Just compare their attire with the more subdued dress of the audiences at their shows, especially during their early shows. X definitely stood out, and perhaps at that time, Japanese pop culture needed them. TLDR, X Japan is immensely influential, just as much as they are controversial. Over the now 40 years, as of 2022, that the band has been active, they have seen a plethora of scandal, tragedy, and controversy. They are as controversial as they are influential. Today, we're going to explore this legendary Japanese band, and we're also going to look at their many controversies head-on. However, before we can understand X Japan, we must first understand the genre and visual aesthetic that they essentially pioneered, that being Visual Kei. Before we get into all that, let's talk about today's sponsor, Atlas VPN. You guys like Japanese stuff, right? I could only assume you do since you're watching this video. You may also be a Japanese music enthusiast, be it city pop, J-pop, J-rap, J-rock, or, Visual Kei. Yours truly personally uses Spotify to find Japanese music, though I sometimes hit little snags, such as geo-restrictions for certain Japanese artists and songs. It's very frustrating when something you want to listen to is only available in Japan, and you're not in Japan. But no longer is this an issue for me, as Atlas VPN came to my rescue. And you know what else is Japanese? Anime! Atlas VPN services can even help you access Japanese Netflix. And did you know that you can watch anime on other versions of Disney Plus outside of the US? They have Urusei Yatsura. You can literally watch Urusei Yatsura on Disney Plus with Atlas VPN. And don't even get me started about security. Among the best features of a VPN, and Atlas VPN does it beautifully. Right now, you can get Atlas VPN Premium for just $1.70 per month plus 6 months extra with a 30-day money-back guarantee. It's the best Atlas VPN offer of the year, so be quick and get your deal by clicking the link in the video description below. It's a limited time offer, so it's limited. Once again, link will be in the description below. It can be said that Visual Kei has roots in the glam rock movement of the 1970s, as this style came about in Japan during the early 1980s. The signature attributes of Visual Kei include elaborate, almost exaggerated makeup, hairstyles, and wardrobe. Some will aim for a more androgynous and fluid appearance as well. While Visual Kei is technically a fashion movement, the look is almost exclusively associated with rock and metal bands, typically ones with heavy Western hairband influence. Def Leppard, Motley Crue, Skid Row, Guns N' Roses, of course, that kind of thing. X comes into play here, as they were a band officially founded in 1982 when Visual Kei was just beginning to emerge, and are listed among the pioneers of this aesthetic, as I mentioned previously. Going into the 1990s and even early 2000s, the trend remained, though saw a significant decline. Popular bands associated with this look, like Glay, L'Arc-en-Ciel, and even X Japan, began to detach from this image somewhat. This movement saw a bit of a resurgence in the mid-2000s that extends to today. This modern equivalent is known as Neo Visual Kei. X has gone through quite a few members over the years, though the two founding members still remain and have known each other much longer than you'd assume. These founding members being Yoshiki Hayashi and Toshimitsu Dayama, though everyone refers to them as their stage names, these being Yoshiki and Toshi. Yoshiki serves as the drummer and sometimes pianist, while Toshi is the lead vocalist. The two are from Tateyama, a city within Chiba Prefecture, and met in kindergarten. Yoshiki and Toshi also attended the same elementary, middle, and high school and had an active interest in music from a young age. Yoshiki specifically, who was a child who suffered from chronic health issues and pursued classical music rather than sports. When Yoshiki was very young, he lost his father, who took his own life. After this, Yoshiki apparently became aggressive and would act out often, breaking objects in the process. Yoshiki's mother decided to buy him a drum set and asked that he take out his frustrations on that. This proved to be more than beneficial, as Yoshiki and Toshi would form their very first band in 1977 at only age 11. The band was initially called Dynamite, though later they changed the name to Noise. In 1982, while still only teenagers, the two formed X. At first, critical reception was negative, claiming that the band could not be taken seriously due to their elaborate costumes. Some even claimed their performances were silly and more like a costume show. Keep in mind, Japanese consumers did not see Japanese artists typically dress or act like this. This was all very new to Japan at that time. This aesthetic and type of music was more typical of Western artists like David Bowie, Elton John, etc. Despite these negative remarks from critics, X began growing in popularity and selling thousands of records as an indie band long before they were signed by a big label. During these early days, the lineup of the band would constantly change, Yoshiki and Toshi being the only two that were cemented as permanent members. Though, this changed in 1985 as Taiji Sawada, or just Taiji, joined the band as the bassist. It was in 1987 when two more prominent members had joined, guitarist Pata and lead guitarist Hide. Hide is particularly interesting, being a cosmetology school graduate and guitarist for the band Saber Tiger, a band that rivaled X in popularity at the time. Hide's addition proved to be unexpected but invaluable. He would eventually contribute to the band as songwriter as well. Hide quickly became among X's most beloved members. It is also worth noting that by this time, in the late 80s, X was releasing music under their own record label. It was titled Ecstasy Records and owned by Yoshiki. Ecstasy Records also took on the releases of a few small acts, but it was short-lived and it's now inactive. X's first album, Vanishing Vision, was their only album released to Ecstasy. The band saw national recognition when signed by CBS Sony, and their iconic second album, Blue Blood, was released in the spring of 1989. Kurenai and Endless Rain, two of X's most beloved tracks, are from this album. If you needed just one song recommendation to hear what X is all about, listen to Kurenai. It's an amazing song. While X saw a great deal of success at this point, this is also where the first of many controversies would come into play. X was at the height of their career in the late 1980s to early 1990s. 2 years following the release of Blue Blood in 1991, X released their third album, Jealousy. This album was also very well received. Silent Jealousy is an amazing song as well. Highly recommend. Also, kind of interesting tidbit I wanted to add because I'm a big Clamp fan, they actually did a music video for the manga titled X, much like their band, in 1992, and it's pretty sick. I'm a big fan of it. Clamp's manga X itself is pretty good, though unfortunately went on a hiatus in 2003, so it's unfinished. The movie is meh. This music video, though, I like it. Jealousy was significant for two reasons. One, it was the final album before X decided to change their name to X Japan. And two, this was the final album to feature Taiji as bassist. So, why did Taiji leave X? Or rather, why was Taiji fired from X and forced to leave the band following his final show at the Tokyo Dome in 1992? There is no definitive answer, but there are many fan theories. Being among the first big controversies, this topic had been debated and speculated upon for decades. Before we even get into those, here are some known facts. Following that final Tokyo Dome performance in 1992, which, by the way, was among 3 Tokyo Dome shows that all sold out very quickly, X made an official announcement and statement that they decided to let Taiji go due to musical differences. That was the only reason given, and the band refused to elaborate. They refused to elaborate further to this day. Though, in some interviews, it's been vaguely revealed that letting go Taiji was a difficult decision and Yoshiki was the one to break the news. He apparently did so at a bar, and breaking this news resulted in a fistfight breaking out between Yoshiki and Taiji. Yoshiki has also stated that this meeting with Taiji ended with both of them crying after the fistfight. Most elaboration on this topic was given in the 2016 documentary We Are X, though not much was really said. Yoshiki merely said that Taiji broke a rule within the band, and what he did was something he could not share or really forgive. According to Yoshiki, whatever Taiji did caused him to have to let him go, and it just had to be done. The other band members were also asked about this in the documentary, however their responses were cut from the final film. They really didn't add much or give any more information on what happened and what he did, what Taiji did, though they did say that the band was very different after his departure. Pretty much that's what you can condense it to. Now, there's also Taiji's official statement regarding this in his autobiography. The reason Taiji gives was a distinct pay gap between him and the other members of the band that Taiji had addressed to Yoshiki, but still that doesn't really add up. So, here are the most common theories for Taiji's departure. This is possibly the most common theory. Yoshiki said that Taiji broke a rule, and despite X's wild appearance, Yoshiki had supposedly implemented a no drugs rule. Drinking? Fine. Smoking? Yeah, that was good too. But under no circumstances would drug use be tolerated. Yoshiki has stated that Taiji broke a rule. This could be the rule. Taiji was known to be temperamental and aggressive in demeanor, while other band members, specifically Hide, were known to be pretty outspoken and anger-prone. Taiji may have been worse and racked up too many arrests and fistfights for it to be tolerable anymore. This was technically the official reason given, and Taiji has said that he had a hard time getting along with Yoshiki in the past. A well-known fact is that during this time, Yoshiki went really hard in composing ballads and introducing more and more of them as time went on into X's music catalog. It has been said that Taiji was not a fan of this. This is a theory I've seen around on forums. While there's no proof of such an attempt taking place, it is worth noting and possible. And of course, this was the reason stated by Taiji himself. Because it's only been stated by him, who knows how much truth there is in this statement. This whole pay gap thing could very well be possible though. And really, it could be a combination of all these things. They could very easily coexist and mingle, creating the perfect storm for Taiji's departure. However, due to later circumstances that we'll discuss later on, we may never know the truth behind why Taiji was fired from the band. Following the controversy with Taiji, the band began seeking out new ventures, specifically attempting to break into the Western music scene. With this attempt came the release of the 1993 album Art of Life. This release featured one track completely in English and is well known for this one sole track. It's 29 minutes long and titled Art of Life. Art of Life featured an orchestration arrangement from the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra in London. Why just one long track though? Yoshiki, who wrote and arranged the song, says it was written during a time where he struggled with thoughts of and wanted to create something that represented his desire to keep going no matter what. Art of Life was recorded in different studios, most notably Yoshiki's recently acquired studio in North Hollywood. There was also recordings in Tokyo and even the famous Abbey Road studio in London. The album did very well in Japan, and critical reception even went as far as describing it as the Japanese Stairway to Heaven. Their attempt to break into the West, however, was an entirely different story. Sony had signed a deal with Atlantic Records in anticipation of a Western release. The deal fell through, supposedly because their English did not sound clear and their accents were too thick. Simply put, the higher-ups passed because X did not sound like native English speakers. It's worth noting that Yoshiki and Toshi both speak English. Toshi specifically has significantly improved in his English pronunciation. In 1993, however, how they sounded prevented their entry into the English-speaking world. Following this, the band entered a dark period, one filled with even more scandal and ultimately tragedy. Following the release of Art of Life, X, now titled X Japan, decided to take a short break and pursue solo projects. Notably, Hide decided to work on more alternative rock-geared music, being backed by the band Spread Beaver. Yes, that is their name. Toshi sought out solo pursuits as well, releasing albums in 1992, 1994, and 1995, but saw issues in management early on. Initially, this task was given to his brother, who simply didn't seem fit for the position. He was fired and given a hefty severance. Following this, Toshi had issues with the next manager, who was straight up stealing money from him. These events only seemed to foreshadow later events that would further take advantage of X's lead vocalist. This brings us to 1993, when Toshi met a woman by the name of Kaori Moritani. In 1993, Toshi starred in a musical version of Shakespeare's play Hamlet. He met Moritani during the production, and the two quickly hit it off. Moritani is known by fans as essentially the Yoko Ono of X Japan. This is because this was the beginning of a series of events that would tear X Japan apart. As Toshi and Moritani grew closer, she began taking him to concerts produced by a group known as Home of Heart. This group was one that Moritani was already a part of prior to meeting Toshi. As a matter of fact, Moritani was good friends with the group founder, a man named Toru Kurabuchi, who went by the name Masaya. One night, Moritani had brought Toshi to one of Home of Heart's New Age concerts where Masaya was performing. Toshi was apparently blown away by this music, described by this group as healing music, quote-unquote. Moritani offered to introduce Toshi to Masaya since she, knew him. Following this encounter, Toshi and Masaya became friends, and Toshi ultimately made Masaya his solo manager. Another decision that would eventually cause problems down the road. It was around this time that X Japan began to regroup and begin work on their next album, 1996's Dahlia. Unfortunately, Dahlia would be X Japan's final album. By this point, Toshi was very much involved with Home of Heart as well as Moritani, and it began to show in his discord with X Japan as a whole. This was due to the influence of Home of Heart as well as Toshi's now fiancée, Moritani. Dahlia saw a release in November of 1996 to an abundance of commercial success. It sold 500,000 copies and stayed at the top of the Oricon charts for 15 weeks. Not as long as the other previous releases, but still pretty good. Almost every track received separate releases as singles. Home of Heart, specifically Masaya, began heavily criticizing Toshi for continuing to create music with X Japan, claiming his contributions to the band were corrupting the youth of Japan and that the band itself was pushing ideas and messages that were demonic. The fiancé, being very much a part of Heart of Home, also enforced this and urged Toshi to quit. Toshi began to believe the critiques of Heart of Home and began to think he was performing under a fake persona and not as his true self. He felt that he should pursue a more simplistic and natural musical persona. Media outlets at the time reported on the outlandish practices of Heart of Home and claimed Toshi was being brainwashed. Years later, Toshi would confirm that he was in fact brainwashed by them. So, what is the deal with Heart of Home? What's their mission statement, and what messages and other weird shit, for lack of better words, are they preaching? First and foremost, Masaya would hold what he called seminars. In said seminars, Masaya would encourage the members to give away their earthly attachments in lieu of their devotion to Home of Heart. This included giving up their money to Home of Heart. These seminars would also cost money, and Toshi was encouraged to bring others and spread their word. Attending many seminars was a requirement in the quote-unquote training Masaya provided. And by training, I mean brainwashing. Members were told to worship only Masaya and complete their training to also become healing masters just like him. Toshi was told he must give up his ego, quote-unquote, to do so. And by ego, he meant give up X Japan and other luxuries. If Toshi went against Masaya's wishes, he would receive verbal and sometimes physical abuse. Masaya would call this feedback. So, in 1997, as his involvement with Heart of Home became even more deeply rooted into his life, he married Moritani. Only months later, Toshi had broke the news to his bandmates that he no longer wanted to be involved with X Japan. Yoshiki was furious, feeling as though he was losing his childhood friend above all else. Regardless, Toshi remained firm. Upon the official announcement in September of 1997, a farewell show titled The Last Live would take place on December 31st of 1997, the final day of the year. Heart of Home's hold on Toshi would only worsen from here as it extended to verbal threats and physical abuse more frequently. Within Toshi's biography, it stated that the leader physically beaten him as punishment for performing with X Japan one final time within the Heart of Home basement. Even Toshi's own wife refused to remain at their home or support him at all at the Tokyo Dome where he was set to perform. Rather, she treated him as though he was being punished and said his involvement with his quote-unquote demonic band was impairing her training. So instead of supporting her husband and offering emotional support during this clearly difficult time that was, kind of her fault, she instead went to Masaya's home and said she would be monitoring Toshi on the live TV broadcast with Masaya. TLDR, this woman's an abusive psychopath. The show itself was rough for the band and nobody really spoke to each other during the rehearsals and final show, especially Yoshiki and Toshi. The environment prior to performing was tense and bitter. It was difficult for everyone present. Now, the show itself was amazing. Just look at Yoshiki's work on the drums here. While Toshi's heart may have not been in it, everyone clearly gave it their all, and the show itself is among their all-time greatest live performances, maybe even the best of all of them. But once that show ended, that was it. Life after the disbandment of X affected the band members in a variety of ways. Toshi began solo work under the Heart of Home's own music label. Yes, they unfortunately have a music label. We'll revisit that in a bit. Yoshiki seemed to be met with an abundance of opportunities, having collaborated with various Western musicians, including Roger Taylor of Queen. Yoshiki would also briefly become a member of Globe, another popular band at this time. Heath and Pata would work with a variety of bands, most notably Pata with Hide and Spread Beaver. Hide himself would release 3 solo albums, the first being before the X Japan split in 1994, and the last being released in November of 1998. This third release was unfortunately posthumous. This brings us to possibly the biggest tragedy of X Japan, the death of Hide. Inarguably, the most notable outcome of the breakup was what became of Hide. This incident is by far the most tragic and monumental event in the entirety of X Japan's history, to the band of course, but to the fans as well. Hide, whose full name was Hideto Matsumoto, was known as the calm big brother of the group. He was often described as motherly and kind, aside from when he partook in drinking heavily. Hide was known to have violent outbursts when drunk, though he was also known to black out and forget these episodes. Overall, he was known as a very sweet and considerate person, though. Hide's career appeared to be flourishing in the spring of 1998. His third solo album was in the works, and his music was widely praised as being unique from his work with X Japan and had a more alt-rock vibe. It was through this outlet that he kept in touch with his former band members. Hide was already established as a talented songwriter as well. Despite the breakup of X Japan, he appeared to be doing well. The situation is a bit complex, so let me begin with the events themselves. Hide had spent February through April of 1998 in Los Angeles. He had returned in late April to begin promoting Jiazu, his latest solo album. On the night of May 1st, 1998, Hide had just wrapped up filming some TV appearances with Spread Beaver to promote that third album. Following this, the group decided to spend the remainder of the night out drinking. One thing about the X Japan members, Hide being no exception, is that they knew how to drink. By that I mean they were no stranger to a night out drinking. With that said, Hide and those who accompanied him stayed out until 6:30 in the morning, literally until sunrise. Hide's brother and manager had driven him home to his apartment located in the luxurious Minami-Azabu, a district within the Minato ward of Tokyo. According to Hide's brother, Hide seemed fine aside from being pretty drunk. Once he saw Hide home safely, he left himself. This was the final time he would see Hide alive. Very shortly after, literally only an hour later at 7:30 a.m. on May 2nd, Hide was discovered unconscious, restrained by the neck with a towel that was hanging from a doorknob. An ambulance was called as soon as possible. It was a little over an hour later at precisely 8:52 a.m. where Hide was officially declared dead at a hospital in the Hiro district of Shibuya. He was only 33. Once news officially broke out, the entire fan base was stricken with devastation and grief. Really, this isn't even an exaggeration. It only worsened once authorities revealed what they had deemed to be the official cause of death. The documented cause of death was listed and announced as... This is when things really escalated. The absolute devastation of fans closely resembled the Yuko syndrome incident only 11 years prior in 1986. The fan aftermath of Hide's death may even be more devastating. Hide's funeral was a very public event, and at least 50,000 grief-stricken fans had shown up. Many of them were in a less than healthy state, and 200 of these attendees required medical attention. A literal first aid tent had to be erected to assist these fans. This included people who fainted from stress and lethargy or even just the heat, to those who fully intended to inflict harm on themselves at the event. Almost 50 of the 200 required hospitalization. The situation only worsened from here. During the direct aftermath, 3 teenage girls had ended their own lives, one found in their room surrounded by Hide photos and merch. One found wearing a Hide shirt. These girls were only 14, 15, and 17 years old. To young, impressionable teens, even young adults who grew up with X at this point, it can be heartbreaking to look up to a famous role model you saw as ideal, strong, and important, only for them to end up not being as strong as you envisioned them in your head. Really, we're all human and we all have weaknesses, but not realizing that until your idol is gone has potential to affect young people in a very negative way. I do now need to address the debate over the cause of death, and that's a very tricky situation with a lot of debate. You see, Hide's bandmates to this day, whether it's his bandmates from his solo efforts or those from X Japan, vehemently deny that Hide's passing was self-inflicted. According to various statements, the towel and doorknob usage is a common method of stretching one's neck when feeling strain from touring as well as constant performing. It's apparently used among musicians. Now, I truly have no credibility, and discussing any truth behind any of this is not really my place, but I do feel this is a possible outcome and a possible cause of death. The doorknob and towel thing is a little odd for this type of self-inflicted scenario. In addition, no note was left. Personally, I feel it's very well possible that Hide was sad and possibly depressed about the X Japan situation at that time, though with him drinking until 6:30 in the morning, he was likely pretty drunk and unable to be fully coordinated in his actions. It's likely that he could have needed to stretch after those TV appearances and just slipped, passed out, or lack the coordination and again reflexes to do this stretch properly and react accordingly to the situation. At the end of the day, it still happened and it's beyond saddening. Hide's probably my favorite member of X Japan. He had such a unique presence and it cannot be replaced, not by anyone. There honestly will never be another Hide. Much like there's music before and after X, there's also X Japan with Hide and after Hide. Hide's passing rocked X Japan far beyond the initial break of the band. With Hide gone, the band would truly never be the same if they got back together. Could they even perform again? Could a force as powerful and vibrant as Hide even be replaced? Toshi continued to become further embedded into Home of Heart, pretty much becoming their poster child with his many musical releases under the Colt's record label. Yes, they're a Colt, 100%. In case I didn't make that clear earlier. I'm not sure how much money from Toshi's music went to Home of Heart, but I'm sure a huge chunk of it did, you know, giving up your earthly possessions to Masaya and all that. By the way, Masaya is still his manager at this point. I'm gonna take this time to try and show you all of what Toshi's Home of Heart releases looked like. Please do not support these releases by purchasing them. The money is not going to Toshi, and it's a really gross situation. Toshi himself even says he won't perform any of these tracks ever again as well. There are a lot of them, and, you know, it's just bad. Don't support them. Anyways, Toshi released solo music to fund the leader under the Heart of Home record label. I've also read claims here and there that Moritani, the wife, also stole Toshi's music to use herself. I'm not sure how much truth there is to that, but I have read it here and there. I guess, when not pursuing her day job as a horrible human being, she moonlights as a musician. Toshi had supposedly performed live 3,000 times with his Home of Heart label between 1999 and 2003. Another weird fact about Toshi's, wife is that she only lived with him as her wife for 1 year. After that 1 year, she moved in with someone. Can ya guess who that is? Yeah, it was Masaya. She was essentially cheating on Toshi with the Home of Heart leader because it was part of her training. Toshi also began serious amounts of debt despite all these music releases. He would ultimately file for bankruptcy. Following the breakup, Yoshiki began receiving more and more music opportunities following his brief involvement with Globe, the most notable of which being composer for the Emperor of Japan. Yoshiki almost did not accept such offers as he endured a period of not wanting to play music at all after losing Hide. Other pursuits of Yoshiki include providing a track to an instrumental Kiss tribute album, as well as writing music for a Korean rock band titled Tracks, and also working on 2 motion picture soundtracks. Oh, he also has a Hello Kitty character. Her name is Yoshikitty. Now, we haven't really talked about Heath yet. He's the bassist that took over after Taiji was fired. Heath was personally acquainted with X long before joining, as he actually performed with his previous band at a music festival produced by Ecstasy Records. This was way back in the early 90s. Heath has been in the Japanese metal visual kei scene just as long as the other X-Japan members at this point, and he's a pretty talented dude. Anyways, Heath and Pata, as well as Spread Beaver's percussionist, would go on to form a group called Dope Heads. The band debut album was released in 2000. They released 2 albums in total. The X-Japan members did not formally get back together again until approximately 2006. This was when Yoshiki received a visit from Toshi in order to discuss and work on a song as tribute to Hide. This was when the band began coming back together once more. After almost 10 full years apart, this track would later become Without You. The official announcement of Toshi and Yoshiki working together again was made on Toshi's website in March of 2007. Toshi had also stated in the We Are X documentary that he was offered a very large sum of money to rejoin the band as a whole. Toshi actually spoke with Home of Heart regarding this, expecting them to completely shut down any thought of rejoining X. To his surprise, they did not. Because of this huge offer in payment, Masaya magically went back on his enforcement and told Toshi to return. Because, the money. Yoshiki around this time was also in a very brief and interesting group, one that only performed one sole time at Anime Expo in 2007 in Long Beach, California. This group consisted of Yoshiki, Miyavi, and Gakuto, and someone by the name of Sugizo that we'll talk about in a little bit. If you're somewhat familiar with J-pop and visual kei, then you would know that a combination of all these successful musicians is pretty dang cool. Gakt, or Gakuto specifically, was a name I recall seeing a lot around the mid-2000s. Anyways, this band was called Skin, and they were very, very much short-lived. At this point, X-Japan had not officially announced their re-establishment, but rumors were all over the place, especially when the group was spotted together in the rooftop of Aqua City, a location on the man-made island Odaiba in Tokyo in October of 2007. This would later be revealed to be the band filming a new track titled IV for the film Saw 4. That's kinda clever, right? The 4 in Roman numerals can also spell IV. Like a thing that goes in your veins. The even cooler thing about this track is it utilizes unreleased guitar recordings from Hide before his passing, so he was still a part of this track despite everything. This was not the only instance of Hide having a presence beyond his passing. We'll see some other creative methods of memorializing him in a bit. But see, there wasn't an infinite amount of guitar tracks from Hide that they could continue utilizing, and there was also the issue of performing live once again. Despite how difficult it would be, replacing Hide's role with the band would have to happen if they wanted to continue working together on future projects. For the time being, they resorted to inviting guest guitarists to play with them. particularly during their first live show as a reform band on March 28th, 29th, and 30th in the Tokyo Dome, the same venue where they had their last live show in 1997. These shows were titled X Japan Resume Attack 2008, Ivy Towards Destruction. And these shows also made use of Hide's previous recordings. During the show's performance of Art of Life, a recording of Hide from a 1993 performance of the track was used as a hologram to play alongside the band. This did not come without issue, as the band saw a few of those during this reunion show. The first show on the 28th was delayed for 2 hours. It's likely, though not confirmed, that this was due to issues with the Hide hologram. There are also later on issues when Yoshiki collapsed on stage. Now, I should add to that latter one that this happened many times before in past performances. You may recall me mentioning that Yoshiki had health issues as a child. These did not go away entirely, as Yoshiki likely lives with chronic illness. He would often overdo it and collapse on stage even in the early days. People often just thought this was part of the show. At this point in 2008, the band members were in their 40s. Yoshiki collapsing like this, while his devotion to his art is nothing short of impressive, is more and more concerning as he gets older. During the other songs, aside from Art of Life, 3 different guitarists filled in. They were Wes Borland of Limp Bizkit, Richard Fortus of Guns N' Roses, and Sugizo. This brings us back to Sugizo. Yune Sugihara, better known as Sugizo, has been in the Japanese rock and metal scene since 1986. At this point, he was probably best known for his work with the band Luna Sea. Yet another clever play on words, since it sounds like lunacy. Sugizo also has experience running his own record label named Cross that he founded in 1997. He has produced music for other bands and has also released his own solo work under this label. He would later join Skin briefly and play at that X Japan reunion show during that one night. On May 3rd of 2008, a show honoring Hide took place titled the Hide Memorial Summit. This show featured many well-known artists who came together to remember Hide on the 10th anniversary of his passing. In Japan, anniversaries hold a special significance. This includes the anniversary of somebody passing, as services are often held when specific anniversaries are reached. This also goes for music artists when they reach a debut anniversary. Sugizo performed with Luna Sea at this show. Later that year, in September of 2008, Yoshiki had announced that a new song was in the works and that a tour would take place at locations throughout the world. It was that very next year, in 2009, that it was announced officially that Sugizo would officially join the band. Other notable events for X Japan during this time would be the announcement of their next official album. This would be their first album since losing Hide. The production of this album was long and rocky and confusing, lasting 10 years and not released to this very day. Actually, it may still be in development. It's, again, very confusing. Two years later, X Japan would embark on their first North American tour. This was an impressive milestone since America was so difficult for them to break into in the early 1990s. The internet and the boom in popularity in Japanese culture likely played a huge part in their westward expansion. I personally discovered a lot of Japanese artists around this time through iTunes as well as anime, so it makes sense. This was not the only thing to happen in this year, though. 2 big things happened, actually. First, there was the surprising announcement that Taiji would be rejoining X Japan as a guest bassist during some shows in August. This would not be a permanent role for Taiji, only temporary. After all, Heath had been replaced as the band's bassist for 18 years at this point. This led to more speculation regarding what the heck Taiji actually did to get kicked out of X. If he was brought back for a bit, it must not have been too horrible, right? But again, we'll probably never know. The next significant event was Toshi finally breaking free from his wife and filing for divorce, which was great for him as he was finally breaking free from Heart of Home and regaining his life. Toshi has spoken publicly about his divorce, stating him and his now ex-wife were, quote, effectively not husband and wife for 9 of their 10 years of marriage. He also added that, quote, aside from having met her occasionally related to work, I do not know anything about her actual life. This is because she lived with Masaya instead of Toshi and was actively cheating on him. She's also widely thought to be a big part of the reason why Toshi was so severely in debt and had to file for bankruptcy. So at long last, Toshi was detaching from Heart of Home, a huge victory amidst so much controversy and tragedy in the years prior. However, yet another tragedy would occur. In 2011, following his brief time playing with X Japan, Taiji would board a flight from Japan to Saipan. It was during the flight itself that Taiji would be involved in a physical altercation and be arrested once the flight landed. Taiji was then faced with federal charges and was held in a cell beginning on July 11th. It was only on July 14th, only a few days after this, that Taiji was discovered unconscious in that same cell. He was rushed to the hospital only to ultimately be found brain dead. Taiji's mother and fiancé ultimately made the decision to remove him from life support 3 days later on the 17th. This was when Taiji passed away. The official reason given was... Taiji's fiancée actively denies that this was the reason for his death, and she openly states that she suspects foul play. Taiji supposedly died from hanging from a bedsheet within his cell. She says that there were no marks on his neck that supported this claim. In addition, his remains were shipped from Saipan and cremated without anyone's consent. The fiancé says nobody gave them permission to do so, and she was expecting to receive his body, not his cremated remains. While it had almost been 2 decades at this point since Taiji was let go from X Japan, this still left a bitterness in the community. Now we come to the unreleased album. This release would be, or should be, the 6th album in total and the first one without Hide. The official announcement was made in 2007, and production has been said to have lasted between 2007 and 2017. Yoshiki has made many contradictory statements and tweets regarding this unreleased album, saying the album was nearing completion, and sometimes saying he wasn't sure if a full studio album was suited for today's digital age. In 2016, an album was released, though it technically was the soundtrack to the documentary film titled We Are X, that was released the same year. There are new tracks on it, though this was apparently not the unreleased album. Only 2 songs, tracks 1 and 14, are new songs that debuted in this soundtrack. This soundtrack is not counted as a full album for this reason. Also around this time in 2016, Pata had been hospitalized due to severe complications with a blood clot. This would delay that unreleased album further. Pata was hospitalized for a year due to this, but he has since recovered, thankfully. The album was also said to be half new songs and half old songs re-recorded in English. Since 1993, Toshi's English proficiency has truly improved dramatically, so that latter part would be really cool to see. In an AMA on Reddit, Yoshiki would say that the band Duran Grey would provide backup vocals on some tracks of this new unreleased album. He also said other X Japan guitarists were filling in for Pata as he recovered. But alas, several release dates were announced and nothing was ever released on those dates. This project is still currently in development. X Japan's last official tour was in 2017, and that 6th album still remains to be seen. To this very day, there has not been an official release since Hide's passing, an official album release that is, and I feel that's especially significant. Perhaps that's a part of the difficulty in seeing this album finally released and made public. For now, it's a pretty prominent piece of Japanese lost media, as it's been confirmed and there are multiple completed tracks. As a matter of fact, 4 years ago in 2018, Yoshiki had said that the album is pretty much done and only needed to be mixed. In 2019, he also said that he's waiting for a good time to release it, and also joked that it may take another 10 years. I personally feel that Hide's presence and memory is very much alive in the members of X Japan. Once this album is out, they'll have a full album release without Hide's involvement and physical presence. That's just my own thoughts though. Hide's memory lives on in Japanese popular culture and remains celebrated. There have been Hide Museum exhibits and even a full Vocaloid produced in 2016 to attempt to recreate him musically. These posthumous Vocaloid projects also exist for Misora Hibari and Hitoshi Ueki. The morality of this has been debated, and it's a bit eerie hearing deceased musicians sing songs they didn't agree to sing, but it's also worth noting that these Vocaloids, Hide's included, are not commercially available to the public. Demo audio does exist where you can hear them all, I'll link that in the description. So what's X Japan up to today? Well, the members are all very active on social media. I've seen a few of their Instagrams, and Yoshiki is especially active. The current band lineup is Toshi, Yoshiki, Pata, Heath, and Sugizo. They all take on multiple roles in the band. Here's that chart I showed earlier. It gets a bit confusing because all of them are just, so talented with their instrument proficiency. It's actually pretty interesting looking at this. Also, most of the members were featured in a rhythm game titled Ecstasy Visual Shock. It's a rhythm game that focuses on Visual Kei music. After all these years, now 40 years since 1982 when it all began, X Japan's legacy remains strong. Despite all this scandal, tragedy, and drama, X Japan remains among the most well-known musical acts in Japan. Even to those not into rock, X Japan is a household name. Most recognize Toshi and especially Yoshiki just by looking at them. Yoshiki faces issues with his health still, now suffering from carpal tunnel and back and neck issues. He has been told by doctors that his quality of life would improve if he just stopped performing or did the bare minimum instead. Despite that, Yoshiki continues doing what he loves, and I respect that. It's part of what makes him a legendary musician. The solo band members and the band itself do make TV appearances every now and then too, sometimes performing, sometimes not. While the future of X Japan and their future releases is uncertain, their past is not. The impact on Japanese music by X Japan is not. They are godlike figures in Japan and are finally seeing success in the Western world. Being seen as the talented rock musicians they are rather than being rejected based on a language barrier. As Yoshiki himself once said, the art of life is breaking the wall. And breaking down boundaries and paving their own path in music is what X Japan does best. I look forward to seeing what they accomplish next. And it is once again time to shout out my beloved, wonderful, lovely Patreons out there. Or patrons. Yep, I'm pretty sure it's patrons, not Patreons. So, special thanks to Airfire, Alan Achondo, Alice Rose, Anna, Andrew LaPena, Andrew Valencia, Angel Pena, Aurora Phoenix, Beastmen Manor, Bishonen Knife, Brandon Tran, Christopher Valencia, Coffee Red Fox, Courtney Von Schriltz, Daniel Barrientos, Digital Dubs, Donut Brewitt, Dude Bro, Eels, Enigdra J. Reese, Felix Gonzalez, Good with a Stain, Grand Tactician, Hilary, Lilo, minus the stitch, Jaws Lisser Plays, I'm sorry, Jordy Kirk, Judy 18, Kevin, Leon X8, Lilia Grasso, Melatici, Merlin Caliber, Metal Mario 64, Michiru OG, Mike Master, Misao, Momo Buns, Morlane, Mr. Anderson, Nicholas Allen, Nicole Turkowski, Oddish Gloom, Pan Fried Life Jacket Awareness, Fong Nan Nan, I believe. Here it is again, PPASSCCATAG. So, Papas Katag. Third time I ruined that name. Quetzalcoatl FC, I think I may have pronounced that one right. Raz Cohen, C. Chameleon, Shrivam Vashi, Soko, Sophia Gilepsy, VHS Vich, Stagio VGMU, and Vani. Once again, thank you so much, guys. I hope you liked this video. It was a pretty long one, and it was just kind of a one-shot with one topic, but it's a topic I am very fond of. I love Japanese music, and I love X Japan, so I hope you guys love this video and enjoy the information that I compiled and put out there for y'all. Anyways, see you all in the next video.